And welcome to this episode of the Capitalized Life and Retirement Show. I'm your host, Matthew Johnson, president and owner of Johnson Wealth and Income Management, a retirement income source located in Clear Lake and Humboldt, Iowa, serving clients in northern Iowa and southern Minnesota. Well, how are you today? I hope you're doing well, enjoying the weather, enjoying your time this weekend. And thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time to be a listener. If you're brand new to this radio show, not only do I want to say welcome, but I also encourage you to take full advantage of everything that this radio show is trying to provide for you. You know, all too often in this world, we think that everyone has an agenda. And I suppose that's true even for this radio show. But all too often, we also tie to that agenda the idea that someone is always trying to sell you something. And I don't want you to feel that way with this radio show. As a fiduciary, you have to understand that when you think about the financial services industry and the diverse design of so many different institutions and so many different advisors, we know that some are commissionable, we know some are fee-based. But at the end of the day, trying to find a financial advisor whose heart really is to educate, I think is ideal. Because remember, it's not the things that we know that hurt us, it's the things that we don't know. Those are the things that always seem to catch us by surprise. And today, we're going to be discussing what if you were next. Now, you can go ahead and you can conjure up any number of different scenarios in your mind when I say, what if you were next? It could be good, it could be bad. What if you were the next, lottery winner? What if you were the next person to, win an award for having, the best lawn on your block? There's good things that can happen. And just by chance, you might be that person. But today I want to talk about the financial aspects of what can happen next. And primarily, I want to focus our conversation today on that of spouses, that of, in particular, wives. As a financial advisor and a fiduciary, I've been in this business and I've been in the business of teaching and helping to do the right thing for clients for well over 25 years. And one of the things that always seems to never change is the response that women have to the world of investing. Now, I get it. The things I hear on a very routine basis is, well, Matthew, this just isn't my bag. I'm not interested in these things. I really don't understand them. They're very confusing for me. Oh, I let my spouse handle these. But ladies, I want to ask you a question. Statistically speaking, between the two of you, you and your spouse, who do you think is probably going to be the surviving spouse in this relationship? Now, I don't have to ask that question and give you too much prompting. You already know that from a statistical standpoint, if you're a female in this country, you are likely to outsurvive and outlast your husband. And that is of major consequence to women today. Because, even for the men, this world, especially this landscape of the market, the landscape of interest rates, the landscape of politics, the landscape of everything that we see happening before our very eyes, as a citizen of this country, is constantly evolving. It's constantly changing. It's constantly surprising us. And it can be difficult even for the most stalwart of men. And so think about for just a moment how that's going to feel when you have all of these changing variables all around you. And at the same time, that's being compounded by the feeling of loss, the feeling of emptiness, the feeling of sorrow from that of losing a spouse. Today, I want to share a story with you that's a very real story, and it's a story that happens so many times throughout a year in the life of yours truly as an advisor. And I want to hit this from different angles. The first and foremost thing is that age is of no consequence. I can have clients that are in their 50s and they can pass away. I can have clients in their 90s and they can pass away. And I can have clients of any age in between that and they can pass away. Age is of no consequence. Genetics may have something to do with it, but the reality is that we can perish at any time. It could be a car accident, it could be a heart attack, it could be any number of things. You just simply don't know. And the thing about death that is so impactful is that it's always such a surprise. Even when you know that it's likely to happen, it still is a shock when it happens. And when we lose a spouse, things go into shutdown mode. I know that so many spouses, male or female, believe that, it's not going to be that bad. I'll still be able to make decisions. And, you might indeed be the exception to the rule. But all too often, you underestimate the power of losing a spouse, someone that you've been with for potentially decades. A woman who's a client of mine recently lost her husband of 24 years. This was a second marriage for the two of them. And in this particular case, little did they ever believe that the husband was going to pass away as quickly as he did. One day in the beginning of this year, he is diagnosed with pancreatic cancer with absolutely no precursors, nothing that would indicate that he has a problem, until all of a sudden he grows instantly sick one day and goes to the doctor and gets the diagnosis, to being passed away in as little as 4 weeks, very quickly. And I want you to think about what was happening in the last 4 weeks of both of their minds, trying to think about all the loose ends, trying to think about all the things that they needed to get fixed, trying to think about where did you put the keys to the safety deposit box? How much money do we have? I'm going to have to pay bills. How do I take care of this? How did you take care of that? These are all very common conversations with a person leading up to an inevitable death. And yet some spouses don't even get that opportunity. Some spouses get a phone call that their husband has been in an accident. And unfortunately, it's not good news. So I don't necessarily mean for this radio show to be a downer today, as much as I encourage it to be, I want it to be an encouragement for productivity. I want it to be an encouragement for progress. You see, whether the world of finance and investing really encourages you and it really gets you, excited, or it's something that you would rather have a full-fledged root canal before you go to meet with your financial advisor, I encourage you to bite the bullet and to begin to participate in those reviews. Because you see, when we simply let the spouse take care of it, and we say, I'll cross that bridge when I get to it, that means that your learning curve is not going to be a learning curve. That means that your learning curve is going to be literally vertical, because everything will be brand new to you. You might have bits and pieces, you might have things here and things there that you've been told or that you've gleaned or that you think you remember. But when the reality sets in that you are now responsible for this money, you are now responsible for the required minimum distributions, you are now responsible for paying all the taxes, you are now responsible for updating beneficiaries and making certain that you have the estate plan in order. All of a sudden, you realize that it's very overwhelming. Talk to any wife who has lost her spouse and ask, what was it like? And you will get the same response. complete and total overwhelm, complete and total confusion, and extreme sense of loss, and just feeling lost. These are all the things that surviving spouses go through. And unfortunately, it's one of those things that cannot ever be remedied 100%, but it can be completely and totally reduced in a meaningful way if spouses will only engage their counterparts. If women will become more involved and they will begin to set down that sense of embarrassment, because there is nothing embarrassing about not knowing. If you're working with a qualified advisor, you're working with someone who truly wants to help you in every way, shape, and form, and you're participating in those reviews, you're asking questions, even if you feel like this is the dumbest question in the world, and you give the disclaimer, now you're probably going to think I'm silly, but I need to know about X. You know what? If you're working with a good quality advisor, that advisor is never going to embarrass you. That advisor is never going to hold you accountable for not knowing. And if he does, it may be an indication that you're working with the wrong advisor. Their bedside manner just isn't good. So what are some of the things that we need to do as, say, men, if we've been kind of shouldering the burden of responsibility of retirement and investing for retirement? These are the things that I want to explore in the second half of today's program. So sit tight. We'll be right back. And welcome back to the second half of the Capitalized Life and Retirement Show. I'm your host, Matthew Johnson, president and owner of Johnson Wealth and Income Management, a retirement income source located in Clear Lake and Humboldt, Iowa, serving clients in northern Iowa and southern Minnesota. Well, if you're just joining us, welcome to today's program. Today, I'm asking a very serious and a very searching question. What if you were next? You know, in today's world, we realize that when you're a single individual, maybe you're divorced, maybe you've just chosen to remain single and unmarried, you have a pretty good handle on what you're doing for retirement. But where things can get so sideways so very quickly is when we have a married couple and we have one spouse who is more of the nerd of the family, and they're the ones that are handling the day-to-day, the month-to-month, the year-to-year responsibility of retirement and retirement planning and retirement investing and all of those things. And yet the other spouse is kind of, somewhere out there just trusting that the other spouse has got it handled. And, that isn't bad. The reality is that there should be that level of trust, and I'm certain for the vast majority of the couples that I work with, that is absolutely the case. But that's not the admonition today. The encouragement today is that if you happen to be the wife, you happen to be the one that has been just kind of relying upon your husband to do the investing, because quite honestly, you just have no desire to be involved with what's happening in retirement and the investment decisions, and I don't understand it all, so I really don't care to be there. Well, you're the person that I want to try to speak to today. There are any number of different scenarios and any different number of different ways in which things can unfold so very quickly for spouses. But one of the stories that I shared in the first half was about this couple that have been clients of mine for years and years and years, and how very quickly death came. The diagnosis of having pancreatic cancer, and about a month later, attending his funeral. And then watching the struggles, watching the emotional things that this surviving spouse had to go through. And this is especially true for those of you that may have a second or a third marriage. We never really want to discuss this, but we all know as human beings that it's true. That everyone tends to get along until there's money involved. And that's one of the things that we don't want to discuss. That's one of the things that we don't want to think about. It's one of the things that we don't even want to admit. But when you have potentially children from a previous marriage, you have to realize that invokes a totally different set of dynamics into what happens with one single spouse when they die. This instance of this woman where her husband's previous children, they became like circling vultures trying to get into her house so that they could, find what they thought was theirs. And to her, that was a complete and total invasion of privacy. And it was. It was very rude. But the reality is that they were so scared that this stepmom that they had was going to take them for everything that they had for inheritance, that they became brash and rude. They became very objectionable. And this was certainly something that my client didn't need. She just got done losing her husband after 2.5 decades of being with him. And she's thinking, my land, why can't you just believe me that I love you as much as I love my own children and I'm going to take care of that? That thought never entered their mind. So if I can, I want to encourage a few various different lists of things that if you will simply just do a little bit of homework on, you will sit down and have a meaningful discussion with your spouse. I guarantee that this will reap multiple benefits. The first is understanding and explaining in very simple terms, or having the advisor explain to, say, your wife in very simple terms, that there are various different types of money and they work differently. There is pre-tax money, money that's never seen the absolute light of day. It's money that the government wants to see you take out so that you can pay taxes on it. That's why things like required minimum distributions at the age of 73 are invoked and why they occur. Understanding that there's tax-free money, money in Roth IRAs, understanding that there's post-tax money, money that you deposited that was after tax, and knowing that you're going to be responsible for paying taxes on interest, paying taxes on dividends, paying taxes on capital gains if you go ahead and you liquidate and you sell the asset. That could be anything from a stock to a mutual fund to a piece of real estate. But just having something very simple as a discussion about that would be an ideal thing. Number 2, letting your spouse know that there are maybe multiple different institutions where money is at. Now, for my set of clients, not only did they have a business, not only did they have their investments, but they also had rentals. And understanding where the various different accounts for the rentals were, understanding the various different types of businesses that were being hired for the maintenance of those rentals and the management of the rentals and the tenants, all of those things were details that were in the mind of the gentleman, but never even really entered the mind of the spouse. And now not only is she saddled with the emotional sorrow of losing her husband after 2.5 decades, but now she's having to become an instantaneous landlord, the manager of multiple rental homes, trying to make certain that she understood we have money in this bank and we have money in this institution and we've got precious metals over here and we have annuities over there and we have life insurance over here and we have brokerage accounts. It was very, very complex and it was very confusing. So helping your spouse understand in advance where the money is at, what it's invested in, what the purpose of those investments really were when you made them, and why you're continuing to hold them can be very instrumental in helping that spouse understand where you are financially. Another area is going to be taxes, and this is a big one because so many people, they kind of subliminally understand that when you lose a spouse, there's going to be an income reduction, but I don't know that they really understand the direct implication. You see, not only when we lose a spouse do we lose a Social Security check, typically, but we're also in a position where the surviving spouse is now going to go from being a joint income tax filer to now being a single income tax filer. And the problem with that is if you have things like, say, systematic income coming from a pension, you have Social Security, which we know is a guaranteed monthly income. Maybe you've got rental income that's coming in, or you got business income. Well, guess what? As a surviving spouse, chances are that income will continue, but she's no longer going to have the joint filing status, which means that where the two of you could be perfectly content within the 12% tax bracket, or maybe the 22%, now being a single income tax filer, still receiving a vast majority of that income, is going to drive them way further up into the tax brackets. Are you not just financially prepared for that, but are you actually psychologically prepared for that? When that spouse has to write the check to the feds and to the state, April 15th, are they going to be prepared for that? Will they have the money set aside? If they choose to sell something and there's a capital gain, are they prepared to pay the capital gains taxes on that? Required minimum distributions, number 4. RMDs are one of these things where all of us should be prepared. But I can tell you from doing literally hundreds of workshops, hundreds of webinars, people from all over the United States today, despite the prevalence of the information about required minimum distributions that exist in the world, it is amazing to me the number of individuals that are still vastly underprepared for RMDs. RMDs are one of those things where the government's not making a suggestion. They're forcing you to take distributions. And every year that you get older, those distributions are getting bigger and bigger. And that ties back to the tax implications and the tax bracket of the single surviving spouse. If you've worked hard and you've got $1.5 million sitting in IRAs and you're having to take out a whole ton of money for RMD satisfaction, what is that going to do to that single surviving spouse? Is she prepared? Does she understand? And more importantly, are you putting her into a position where she now has to make investment decisions as to what to sell every year to satisfy your RMD if you didn't satisfy it by the time you passed, as well as her own when that IRA rolls into her name and she takes it over? Or are you best prepared where she does not have the stress and the worry of having to sell assets to cover the RMD? Rather, the RMD is covered ideally through interest and dividends. Have you set her up for success? This is a major question. Number 5, and I shouldn't even have to bring it up, but I have to, because we're all human beings. And I know as well as any of you, that procrastination is just a part of human nature. And this is estate planning. Have you taken it upon yourself to truly sit down with your spouse and make decisions and come up with an estate plan? Because here's the thing. If you haven't, you need to, and you know you need to. Is it going to cost you money? Absolutely. Is it going to cost the time and the effort that it takes to go through? Yes, it will. It might even cost some awkward conversations. But this is something that you have to do. Do it for her. Do it for your family. So you've got a little bit of homework. I encourage you, get your spouse engaged. Write down questions that you have. If you don't know the answers, well, ask them. Write them down and find various resources. This is a big one. Note everything, where things are at, what they're worth, what the account numbers are, and then go back and double check it. You know, one of the worst things that has happened to this spouse is the fact that there was a business that was owned. And the husband had continually made comments to say, you receive half of the business, but little did he realize that he had failed to put the shares in her name. And so now that half of the business has gone elsewhere. I'm Matthew Johnson. Thank you so much for listening and watching. But remember, it's up to you to make today a great day. Do what's right. Do what's necessary. You'll never regret it. Thanks so much.